Now, though, we're going to turn our attention to a much more sane county when it comes to managerial appointments. Mayo on the lookout for a new manager after James Horan stepped away following their All-Ireland defeat to Kerry earlier in the year. There are 4 candidates to replace James Horan: Kevin McStay, Mike Solon, Ray Dempsey and Declan Shaw, and all 4 have put together star-studded backroom teams, so it's going to be fascinating to see what develops over the next few weeks. The Mayo GEA committee has been appointed. It features the chairman Seamus Toohey, the treasurer Valerie Murphy, the assistant secretary Ronan Caron and the South Mayo County Board chairman Mike King, Sean Silk, who's a human resources manager and won an All-Ireland senior hurling medal with Galway, and Pat O'Donnell, a former managing director of Allergan Pharmaceuticals and also current member of the Corja Mayo fundraising committee. The Mayo GEA secretary Dermot Butler not involved in the committee owing to a conflict of interest. Both Stephen Rochford and Damien Mulligan, clubmates of him. Butler said to the Mayo News yesterday, "Of course there's pressure to get things right this time, and at the end of the day I believe we'll end up with the very best candidate. It's important that we get it right and that we're seen to do the right thing." The Mayo News also reporting yesterday that a former Mayo footballer is expected to be added to this committee over the coming days. To chat about what will happen next and what has gone before, Ed McGreal of the Mayo News is with us. Evening, Ed.
Evening, Nathan. How are things?
I am alright. So Philly McMahon said in his Irish Independent column last week, the process around the Mayo job has become a bit of a circus over the last couple of weeks. In most counties you might only get rumours about the identities of the candidates just before ratification or there's an official announcement. Not only does everyone know who's in the frame in Mayo, their entire backroom teams are public knowledge, and one of the candidates is doing in-depth interviews with the local paper outlining his case. It's like electing a GAA president or the Rose of Tralee. That fair?
Yeah, what do you think? Far be it from me to disagree with Philly McMahon, but it's an interesting perspective, and it's certainly one that has got a lot of currency of late because, and I think one of the main reasons for it is it has been dragging quite a bit. But I just think from an overall point of view, if you look at the history of Mayo appointments, and I wrote about this a few weeks ago in the Mayo News, it has been inglorious. There has been so many inglorious episodes in the last 30 years or so. So I think that's something that you have to factor into it. And the other thing as well, some counties do their, like we saw Kilkenny did their business so swiftly after Brian Cody's resignation. Derek Ling is in there. I think you have to bear in mind the level of trust in the Kilkenny County Board would be a lot higher than the level of trust in the Mayo County Board, and I think that's a factor. And as well as that, I just think it's if you look back to this time last year, Kerry went down a similar road where they had appointments, they invited applications when they didn't renew Peter Keane's position. Jack O'Connor's did an interview, and Paddy Talley's name was known in advance of those interviews. The Stephen Stack team was revealed in advance as well, a star-studded team that was overlooked, and you know, Kerry can say it worked out very well for them, and they're all Ireland champions now. So yeah, I think some of this is because it's Mayo. People say it's going to be it's becoming a circus, but I just think when you go down this process of inviting submissions, of course, guys are going to consider letting it be known what their backroom team are, and 3 of them have publicly have confirmed them effectively, and Ray Dempsey hasn't confirmed his, but there's a lot of talk about who's involved in his backroom team. So that creates its own level of interest, and of course, like I say, the length of time is the key, and this is where there will be distinction with Kerry. Kerry had their business wrapped up in less than a month from when they said that Peter Keane wasn't going to be renewed. Jack O'Connor was announced as that was at the start of September. Before the month was out, Jack O'Connor was a new Kerry manager. James Horan stepped away 6 weeks ago on Monday, and Mayo still haven't had the interviews, let alone appointed the manager to replace him. So you're looking at it realistically, it could be over 2 months. So that's I suppose where you can absolutely see a lot of criticism for what has been happening, and it's very fair comment because it could be run a lot quicker than it has been.
And I guess the county board would say, listen, if they get the right person, it's worth that wait. Even though the Mayo Club Championship getting underway. You want that manager to be there making assessments on new players. We were probably lucky to get you, Ed, because it does seem as though the Mayo News phone line has been hopping with all sorts of people wanting to talk to the Mayo News. So Dermot Butler, the Mayo GA secretary, in response to, well, Philly McMahon, I assume, said there are social media hacks out there calling the whole thing a circus, but they know nothing about what they're talking about and aren't taken seriously by anyone with a real involvement in sport. No matter what we do, we'll have these so-called scholars on social media criticising us, but they just make me laugh. They think they know what they're talking about. They think they have an inside track on what's happening, but they don't. The term circus, if it's thrown out there, it's because of what has gone before around Mayo. And you speak about the last 30 years,
Absolutely.
but talk a bit more about more modern times, maybe going back to James Horan's appointment first time round after John O'Mahony lost the job, and then what's gone on in the 3 or 4 times between them when Mayo have had to appoint a new manager. The people do feel at times it becomes a bit of a circus.
Yeah, and absolutely, like trust is earned, and the county board in Mayo have to earn that trust, and you know, they have to earn it in this process, and they'll have to earn it the next time and the next time and the next time again, because there's a lot of water under the bridge on this. And you mentioned James Horan's first term in 2010. Like Tommy Lyons was the favourite of the top table, effectively, of the county board at the time, even though, from what we can gather, he wasn't the recommendation of the interview subcommittee. They leaned towards James Horan, but it was only when there was a bit of pushback within the county at news that Tommy Lyons seemed set to get the job, that there was a U-turn, and that James Horan ended up getting the job. And then James Horan did 4 years after losing in Longford. Mayo were in 4 consecutive All-Ireland semi-finals and 2 All-Ireland finals. And then he stepped down after losing to Kerry and Limerick in 2014. And then Kevin McStay applied for put his name forward, and was spoken to, I gather, by the county board. Interviewed informally. There was nobody else forward for the position at that stage. But before the close of applications, I think Noel Kennelly and Pat Holmes went in as a joint ticket, and Kevin McStay was told effectively that would he continue with an interview process, but he wasn't the preferred choice of the top table. And needless to say, that didn't play out very well. And the following year, then, of course, there was the infamous heave against the management of Pat Holmes and Noel Kennelly when the players voted, I think, a 3/4 majority of no confidence, effectively, in the management. And that was an inglorious episode as well, for a number of reasons. Stephen Rochford took over, managed Mayo for 3 years, got them to 2 All-Ireland finals, and he went in 2018 in, you know, it wasn't very well handled either. It was far from straightforward. And James Horan came back in 2019, and that was far from straightforward at the time as well. He ended up putting his name forward, being nominated by his club and a couple of other clubs, I believe, and ended up getting the job. But there's questions over whether he was the preferred choice for a number of the top table as well. So it has been like I say, an inglorious saga, this whole appointment of Mayo managers, in terms of how people have been appointed and in terms of how they've been removed, or how things have finished up.
Yet ironically, they've almost always ended up with the right man.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah.
Or certainly someone who went on to become a success, with the exception of Holmes and Kennelly from the player's point of view.
Yeah, and look at, and people would say back to that Mayo lost an All-Ireland semi-final after a replay under their management as well. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at it. But no, effectively, in a lot of cases they have, but sometimes the feeling will be it will be in spite of themselves rather than because of themselves. And that's why I think this process that they have underwent now, where people have to nominate, there's a subcommittee which is set to have 4 people from the county board, 3 outside people, and there's a very structured interview process to ensure effectively transparency and fairness, transparency for everyone and fairness for those 4 people in this particular case that have put their name forward and put their heads on the block, that they all be treated with the respect that they deserve for having the having the bravery and the gumption to go for this job. So I think the process as a consequence will take a certain length of time, but it could be further down the road than now. For instance, it wasn't until 2 weeks after James Horan stepped down that Mayo started the process of seeking a replacement, because they wanted to wait until the All-Ireland minor final was out of sight. And that's straight away. That's a delay at the start, and the closing date for applications was Friday, July 29th at 6 p.m. And it wasn't until the following Tuesday that the county board met to talk about setting up a subcommittee. And I just feel they could have done that much sooner as well.
And to defend the county board there, and obviously there have been issues previously, by delaying and by not rushing in, as you say, it does give an element of transparency to this, that everybody knows the 4 people going for it, everybody knows their backroom teams. And while the vacuum that's been left over the past few weeks does in Mayo lead to a hell of a lot of noise and rumour and speculation, that they didn't just jump the gun here, they didn't appoint a favoured person 2 weeks afterwards. Actually, they're being slow, they're being methodical, they're thinking about this. Am I giving them too much credit?
No. Look, and you mentioned the club championship. The club championship doesn't start until September, so they are hoping to have this process closed by the end of August. But I do think within the parameters of the structure here, which I think allows fairness and transparency, I do think that they could have been a little bit more efficient than looking at an overall at a 2-month window. But like you say, none of that will matter really if people feel by the end of this process that by and large that it has been fair and it has been transparent, and that there's a general feeling that they have, that a strong candidate has come through and has gotten the position. There's no doubt about it. With 4 people in this race and 4 like the quality of candidates and backroom teams have surprised a lot of people, myself included. That was the level of interest, because there was concerns in advance that getting a strong management team mightn't be simple, and that isn't the case anymore. So the county board find themselves in a good position. But obviously, there's going to be three sets of management teams that will be very disappointed, and there will be people who would support them and feel that they're the best people for the job. So there won't be, universal support for whoever gets over the line. But if there is a sense that it has been carried out the proper way and that everyone feels that they got a fair crack at it, it will make it a bit easier. But you know as well as I do, Nathan, like whoever gets the job, they're not going to be off the hook. There's only one talk. Whoever gets this job, there's only one prize.
Said, I've only got one thing in mind.
Unfortunately, fortunately maybe, but at this stage, that's what the Mayo senior football team and their manager will be judged on is can they get the big canister in, I was going to say September, in July or August, whenever it will be next year, or the year after for that matter. That's the long and the short of it. The
most interesting name, and the one that came out of the blue, was Kevin McStay throwing his hat back in the ring again, and then putting together a backroom team of Stephen Rochford, who's come closer than anybody to getting Mayo to that holy grail, Donny Buckley, who's got a brilliant reputation as a coach, Damien Mulligan, who's well known in local circles, and Liam McHale, who was one of Mayo's greatest ever players and a key part of the last time McStay went. We might go back to 2014 and the fiasco that developed around that appointment of Holmes and Kennelly, and McStay and McHale missing out. I remember being here and Off the Ball on that Saturday when we were talking about the upcoming interviews and getting word that actually a decision has already been made and that McHale and McStay have been told they're probably not getting this. And then the following Tuesday night, when they thought they were going to be actually doing their official interview, Liam McHale actually ended up on this show talking to Joe about the fact that it was already a done deal and that they knew they weren't getting the gig. Here's what he had to say.
Liam, with this situation, with what's happened here, put you, I know you can't speak for Kevin, but would it put you guys off running again?
I would imagine. We felt that the time was right now for us to go for the job. With our ages now, and with the way we are in the game at the moment, and we felt that the team was good enough win an All-Ireland. So I don't know. I can't speak for Kevin, but the biggest disappointment for me is not that we didn't get the job this time, but the biggest disappointment for me, Joe, is I'd probably never be involved with Mayo again as coach or selector or whatever, and obviously my dream from 18 years of age to now was to win an All-Ireland with Mayo. I failed to do it as a player, so I was always hoping one day that I might be able to do it as a coach or as a manager or a selector or whatever. And I feel for me now that day is done, that I'll never be involved with Mayo football again,
Ed, there was a lot of raw emotion that night from Lee McHale, and Kevin McStay was on this show a couple of years ago with Joe and talking about it again and how he felt, his time as an inter-county manager was done and he would never take charge of Mayo. What's your understanding of what's changed that McStay and McHale are willing to put themselves out there again?
Yeah, well, I suppose, when Lee McHale was speaking there, like you said, there would have been a lot of raw emotion. And I know Kevin McStay has been quizzed on this in the past, and even on our own podcast in the Mayo News, and he's always been ambivalent about it. He's never, ruled it out or ruled it in. So it was, the news started to emerge on the Thursday morning. That's the 28th of July. Just the deadline was 6 p.m. the following day. News started to emerge that his name was in the hat. It did catch a lot of people by surprise, because whilst he had been mentioned in a general sense in the same way that Jim McGuinness or Jim Gavin or Malachy O'Rourke were mentioned, he wasn't in the list of people at local level that people were saying were going to go forward. That seemed to be limited up until that week to Ray Dempsey, Mike Solan and Stephen Rochford, and then Declan Shaw and Castlebar Mitchells came forward as well. His candidacy was confirmed 3 days previously, so it did catch a lot of people by surprise. But I'm just thinking back to 2014 and when that happened, and there would have been a sense then among some people in Mayo that Mayo's chance had to win an All-Ireland had come and went, and yet they ended up being in All-Ireland finals in 16 and 17 and 20 and 2021 and still haven't got over the line. But maybe there's a sense, and if you see that backroom team that has come together, and you look at the other backroom teams, there's a sense that they obviously feel that there is an All-Ireland there. And we were having this discussion with Tony Lean from the Examiner on our own podcast recently, and he was saying that he was surprised by the quality of people that had come forward. And I just think a factor for that is that it's probably a lot more wide open of an All-Ireland championship now than it might have been in 16, 17, etc., when Dublin were so strong. I would argue Mayo themselves were stronger then than they are now, but the field has come back a little bit. And there's, you saw Galway obviously making massive inroads this year, Derry likewise, Tyrone coming from left field to win an All-Ireland last year. So maybe that sense is out there that it's going to be a very competitive All-Ireland championship, and that obviously these four candidates feel that there still is an All-Ireland potential in this Mayo squad.
Like, Rochford's name as part of the backroom team is perhaps the most interesting of all, because, as I say, like, he took Mayo to the absolute brink in 16 and 17 against arguably the greatest football team we've ever seen and pushed them to within an inch of their life. He's since gone on and taken that secondary role with Donegal, without a huge amount of success there. But from the outside, would have felt that Rochford, if he had gone in as number one, that he would have had a huge chance. Is that just personal circumstances that he doesn't want that responsibility, that weight of responsibility? He's a bit happier now in the shadows.
Well, I'm not entirely sure. It certainly it was a matter of weeks after he finished with Mayo in 2018 that he pitched up in Donegal, and I think a lot of people at the time were surprised that he was willing to go in as number two, having come so close to winning an All-Ireland as a manager, and to go in at number two with Donegal under Declan Bonner. But it did, I suppose, show a lack of ego, perhaps, and also maybe after those 3 years he felt, is there more to be got out of it personally, concentrating on the coaching side of things rather than the rigmarole that comes with being an inter-county manager in terms of everything. The buck stops with you. Everything that happens has to go through you. And like it's become a behemoth in the last decade or so. So again, I'm speculating. Maybe that was the sense he had of it, that that going in as a number two or as part of a management team might suit him, or might be what he preferred. But certainly, when news emerged that he was going to be a number two with Kevin McStay, that was a surprise in the county as well.
You might just run through the other contenders then, who wouldn't be as well known outside of Mayo. Mike Solan led Mayo to underage All-Ireland success, has been strongly linked with the job before.
Yeah, so Mike Solan managed Mayo. He took the under-21 team over in 2016 and brought them all the way to All-Ireland title. They beat Cork down in Ennis. And the under-20s then, he would have, in 2018, in the first year of the new grade, he took that team to an All-Ireland final in Croke Park, where they were beaten by Kildare. And he managed Mayo at under-21/20 for 5 seasons in total, and subsequently went on to be number two with Andy Moore and his good friend from Balladreen with Leitrim last year. So he's put his name forward, and he's pulled together a backroom team of Aidan O'Rourke, the former Armagh footballer and head of high performance sport at Queen's University in Belfast. And also with him is Eamon O'Hara, the former Sligo footballer, and 2 former Mayo footballers, Mark Ronaldson from Shule and Alan Murphy from Ballinrobe, who'll be better known to people for his Galway United exploits, and indeed with other clubs in the League of Ireland. So that's Mike Solan's team. And then Declan Shaw, who would have been joint manager of Castlebar Mitchells when they won 3 in a row county titles in Mayo 2015, 16 and 17. And the first year of that, they went all the way to the All-Ireland Club final, beating Corofin and Crossing Glen Rangers en route, but lost the final. They were favourites in the final, but lost the final to Ballyboden St Enda's. And he has pulled together a backroom team of Paddy Christie, the former Dublin full-back, who has coached in Tipperary in recent years with the senior team and managed the under-20 team down there. And he also has Desi Sloyne, another former Sligo footballer, Richie Feeney, a former Mayo footballer and a clubmate of his at Castlebar Mitchells, and Cormac Rowland, who has played with Lardon and Knockmore in Mayo and has coached with Castlebar Mitchells and other clubs such as Park and Island 80 in recent years. So that's Declan Shaw's team. And
Ray Dempsey is an intriguing name, because I think he was the early favourite. He's had huge success at club level, and then it hasn't been confirmed, but the makeup of his backroom team with potentially Oisin McConville and Paul Galvin is a bit of a bolt from the blue as well. Is that and it's probably hard to tell, but is that a response to the star-studded nature of the McStay team?
I don't know. I certainly, if it is, he moved very quickly, because those names started to do the rounds very quickly that weekend. And of course, we have to say that we don't know. These names haven't been confirmed. I spoke to Ray Dempsey myself, and he said he didn't want to reveal it. He wanted to go through the proper processes, and he wanted to release it, through county board channels when he felt the time was right. But those names certainly were out there in the ether, around that weekend when the deadlines closed. So I think I would imagine he had worked on previous to that. And another name that has been linked there is Keith Higgins, the former Mayo footballer. So again, none of these names are confirmed, but there has been no, I suppose there's been no refusal of their names being out there in the ether either. But Ray Dempsey himself, he played for Mayo like Kevin McStay, and he played for Mayo in All-Ireland finals. He managed the Mayo minors in 2007, 2008, 2009, got them to 2 All-Ireland finals. They were very unfortunate in 2008 to lose after a replay to Tyrone. And then he took Mayo under 21s for 3 years. So he would have no more than Michael Solan. He would have coached some of the players that are still involved in the Mayo squad currently. And in recent years, I think it's his 3rd time in charge of his own club of Knockmore. He's a very proud Knockmore man. He's led them to back-to-back county titles. They won in 2020. It was their first county senior title in 23 years. And they followed that up with a victory in the 2021 championship, and are many people's favourites to do 3 in a row this year, even though it will be a very competitive club championship. So he's a guy who would have been, talked about while James Horan was in charge, that he would be in the mix for in the discussion for the next Mayo manager. So certainly him putting his name forward wouldn't be a surprise. And again, no more than like I said in general, like the quality of the backroom teams across the board has caught a lot of people by surprise, because there's a high quality there.
It probably does make Mayo in some ways the envy of a lot of counties, with the sheer quality of names that have been linked with this, from the manager position to the backroom position. And I guess that is where the danger lies for the county board if this were to become a circus, because there are big reputations, there are big personalities, and as you say, for three of those teams they're going to end up disappointed, and it's almost more important how they handle that than the appointment of the manager.
Yeah, like it's you can look at it that way, and you can also say like it's nearly gift wrapped by throwing the floor open to nominations and saying that this was the process that was going to be followed, the process that they used for the under 20 and under 17 manager appointments in recent years as well. It meant, the county board weren't going headhunting per se, like they might have done in the past. And I don't think if they had went headhunting, you would have had the caliber of teams available. You may not have. So I think they've found themselves in a good situation, but they obviously have to make sure that they handle it properly from here on in. And like I say, the only criticism I'd have of them so far, two criticisms really. One is the time side of things, and the second one is the communication side of things. I think they've been reactive rather than proactive in terms of how certain pieces of information have got out, and I think they could have managed that better. But I think overall, they're in a good solid position. It's like, to use an analogy, like they're at the 3/4 mark now in the game, and they're shooting for home, and it's just a question now of getting it done and making sure that the process is fair. And again, with the committee that has been formed there, they're struggling to get a former player. So that remains to be seen who they get for that position, if they get anybody. But they have a six people in place. We understand there will be a 5-person interview board drawn from those 6/7 people that will actually meet the candidates. Right.
And that's due to happen early next week, is it?
The interviews are due to commence next week. Now, okay. I'm not entirely sure if all of them will take place next week, because obviously the month it's in, not everybody might be available, but my understanding is that they're certainly going to commence next week.
Well, it won't be decided on social media, was the early message about this, but we did ask the off-the-ball audience, which I'm not sure was the right thing to do, because you'd have Galway people and Roscommon people trying to hijack this, and we don't really care what they think. Let's be quite honest about that. 58% Kevin McStay, 20% Mike Solon, 15% Ray Dempsey, and 7% Declan Shaw is what the off-the-ball listeners are saying. Would that sort of fit in with your sense of how this might go?
It's hard to know. Yeah, I know, for instance, the Mayo GA blog was considering putting up a poll as well, and decided against it until Ray Dempsey's backroom team was confirmed. And I think it's hard to be certain until that team is confirmed, because there's been other names that have been mentioned, and it's hard to be certain how much validity is with them or not. So it's hard to, I suppose, make a definitive decision without all the facts in front of you. But yeah, maybe that'll be, maybe for the next time they're doing up a process, they should just go with an online poll. That'd be a bit of fun.
Who knows? Ed, great stuff as always. Ed McGreal there from the Mayo News.